Hi, kids. Okay, love you guys. We'll get through this. So, I'm going to be reading from Les Miserables. My videos take a long time to upload, so what I'll do is they're going to be short, and every time we're going to go ahead and you guys are going to pull quotes and then go on to the next video. So we don't start until book 2, The Fall. The first book, and it's on page 59 of this book. Okay, so the first book is all about the Bishop of Dean, and he's important, but his background is really not as important. So we're going to start book 2, The Fall. The night after a day's walk. An hour before sunset, on the evening of a day in the beginning of October 1815, a man traveling on foot entered the little town of Dean. The few people who were then at their windows or doors viewed this traveler with a sort of distrust. It would have been hard to find a figure who looked less prepossessing. He was thick-set, of medium height, stout and hardy. In his full maturity, he might have been 46 or 47. A slouched leather cap half hid his face, burnt by the sun and wind, and dripping with sweat. His shaggy chest was exposed through the coarse yellow shirt fastened at the neck by a small metal anchor. He wore a tie twisted like a rope, coarse blue trousers, worn and shabby, white on one knee and with holes in the other, a ragged old grey blouse, patched on one side, with a piece of green cloth sewn with twine. On his back was a well-filled knapsack, firmly buck-lead and new. In his hand he carried an enormous gnarled stick. His stockingless feet were in hobnailed shoes. His hair was cropped and his beard long. The sweat, the heat, his long walk, and the dust added an indescribably sordid quality to his tattered appearance. His hair was shorn but bristly, for it had begun to grow a little, and seemingly had not been shaved for some time. Nobody knew him. He was evidently a traveler. Where had he come from? From the south, perhaps from the sea, for he was entering Dean by the same road that 7 months before the Emperor Napoleon had taken from Cannes to Paris. The man must have been walking all day long, for he appeared very weary. Some women of the old city at the lower part of the town had seen him stop under the trees of the boulevard Cassendi and drink at the fountain at the end of the promenade. He must have been very thirsty, because some children who followed him saw him stop 200 steps farther on and drink again at the fountain in the marketplace. When he reached the corner of Rue Pontchevert, he turned left and went toward the mayor's office. He went in and a quarter of an hour later emerged. The man humbly raised his cap to a gendarme seated near the door on the stone bench, where General Drouot had stood on March 4th to read to the terrified inhabitants of Dean the proclamation of the Gulf Juan. Without returning his salutation, the gendarme looked him over attentively, watched him for some distance, and then went into the town hall. There was at the time in Dean a good inn called La Croix de Colbas. Its keeper was one Jacques Labarre, a man held in some esteem in the town because he was related to another Labarre, who kept an inn at Grenoble called Tron Dauphins, and who had served in the guides. At the time of the Emperor's landing there had been much talk in the countryside about this inn of Tron Dauphins. It was said that General Bertrand, disguised as a wagon driver, had made frequent trips there in January, and had distributed crosses of honor to the soldiers and handfuls of Napoleons to the peasants. The truth is that the Emperor, when he entered Grenoble, refused to stay at that prefecture, saying to the prefect, after thanking him, "I am going to the house of a brave man, an old acquaintance," and he went to the Trois Dauphins. This glory of the Labarre, of the Trois Dauphins, was reflected 25 miles to the Labarre of the Croix de Colbas. They would say of him, "He's a cousin of the man from Grenoble." So it's not on his own merits, but it's because of someone way far away with the same last name who had a possible interaction with Napoleon. The traveler turned toward this inn, which was the best for miles around, and immediately went into the kitchen, which opened onto the street. All the stoves were fuming, and a great fire was burning briskly in the fireplace. The innkeeper, who was also the head cook, was going from the fireplace to the saucepans, very busy superintending an excellent dinner for some wagon drivers who were laughing and talking noisily in the next room. Whoever has traveled knows that nobody fares better than the wagon drivers. A fat marmot, flanked by white partridges and a goose, was turning on a long spit above the fire. On the stoves were cooking 2 large carp from Lake Lazat and a trout from Lake Alaz. The host, hearing the door open and a newcomer enter, said, without raising his eyes from the ranges, "What will Monsieur have?" "Something to eat in a room." "Nothing easier," said the host, but on turning his head and taking in the traveler, he added, "For pay." The man drew from his pocket a large leather purse and answered, "I have money." "Then," said the host, "I am at your service." The man put his purse back into his pocket, took off his knapsack, put it down by the door, and keeping his stick in hand, sat down on a low stool by the fire. Dying being in the mountains, October evenings are cold. However, as the innkeeper went back and forth, he kept a careful eye on the traveler. "Is dinner almost ready?" said the man. "Almost," the innkeeper answered. While the newcomer was warming himself with his back turned, the worthy innkeeper, Jacques Labarre, took a pencil from his pocket, tore off the corner of an old newspaper, lying on a little tablet near the window. On the margin he wrote a line or two, folded it, and handed the scrap of paper to a child, who served him as a lackey and kitchen help. The innkeeper whispered a word to the boy, who ran off in the direction of the town hall. The traveler saw nothing of this. He asked a second time, "Is dinner almost ready?" "Soon," said the host. The boy came back with a paper. The host unfolded it hurriedly, as one was expecting an answer. He seemed to read carefully, then tilting his head, thought for a moment. Finally he stepped toward the traveler, who seemed drowned in troubled thought. "Monsieur," he said, "I cannot receive you." The traveler half rose from his seat. "Why, are you afraid I won't pay you, or do you want me to pay in advance? I have money, I tell you." It's not that." "What then? You have money?" "Yes," said the man. "And I," said the host, "I have no room." "Well, put me in the stable," the man replied quietly. "I can't." "Why?" "Because the horses take up all the room." "Well," the man responded, "a corner in the attic, a bale of hay. We'll see to that after dinner." "I cannot give you any dinner." This declaration, made in a measured but firm tone, appeared serious to the traveler. He got up. "But I'm dying with hunger. I've been walking since sunrise. I've come 35 miles. I will pay, and I want something to eat." "I have nothing," said the host. The man burst out laughing and turned toward the fireplace and stoves. "Nothing? And all that?" "All that is spoken for." "By whom?" "By them, the wagon drivers." "How many of them are there?" 12. "There is enough there for 20. They have ordered and paid for it all in advance." The man sat down again and said, without raising his voice, "I'm at an inn. I'm hungry, and I will stay." The innkeeper leaned over him and said in a voice that made him tremble, "Go away." At these words, the traveler, who was bent over, poking some embers in the fire with his iron-shod tip of his stick, turned around suddenly and opened his mouth as if to reply, when the host, looking steadily at him, added in the same low tone, "Stop. Enough of this. Shall I tell you your name? Your name is Jean Valjean. Now shall I tell you who you are? When I saw you come in, I suspected something. I sent to the mayor's office, and here's the reply. Can you read?" So saying, he held out the paper that had just come from the mayor. The man glanced at it. After a short silence, the innkeeper said, "It is my custom to be polite to everyone. Now go." The man bowed his head, picked up his knapsack, and went out. He took the main street, walked at random, slinking near the houses like a sad, humiliated man. Not once did he turn around. If he had, he would have seen the innkeeper of the Croix de Colbas standing in the doorway with all his guests, and the passer-by gathered about him, speaking excitedly and pointing at him. And from the looks of fear and distrust that were exchanged, he would have guessed that before long his arrival would be the talk of the whole town. He saw nothing of all this. People weighed down with troubles do not look back. They only know too well that misfortune stalks them. All right, go ahead and pull quotes.